To paraphrase Benjamin Franklin, every one of us is going to pass away someday, after we all get taxed. However, there's a curve. You could go on your sleep, or suffer a far more unpleasant fate. Scientists Paul Doherty and writer Cody Cassidy sat down to mull over the worst possible ways to go. And they came up with some improbable, but no less terrifying scenarios. So, today we're digging up the most painful ways to die, according to science. But before we get started, be sure to subscribe to the Weird History channel. After that, leave a comment, and let us know what other macabre history you'd like to hear about. All right, gang, we're on our deathbed, so let's start confessing. To survive in a plummeting elevator, the standard advice is to lie down on your back flat on the floor. This action spreads the G-force out evenly across more of your body, making it more likely you'll live through the process. Although, let's be honest, you're still trapped in a plummeting elevator either way. But let's say you didn't think to lie flat. What would happen? If you're standing at the moment of impact, your internal organs may try to keep moving, despite the rest of you not following suit. Because of this, your organs could tear out from the bottom of your body all at once, and your limbs may break under the impact. Your head, however, would remain farthest away from the bottom of the elevator, meaning you may survive long enough to see your insides make their way outside. At this point, pray you've gone into shock. Luckily, due to many safety improvements, finding yourself trapped in a rapidly falling elevator is highly unlikely unless you live in the Final Destination universe, in which case, maybe take the stairs. Well, you know what? Those are probably bad too. Before you ask, scaphism was an intricate torture method once used by the Persians, and while you'd probably expect any method of enhanced interrogation to be an unpleasant way to go, scaphism is a particularly gnarly way to punch your final ticket. Here's a hint. You could technically call it candy manning. First, your captors would stuff you in a hollowed tree trunk between a pair of boats, with your head and feet protruding from either end of the hollow log. Then they'd force-feed you milk and honey. Next, they would pour more milk and honey all over you, including into your eyes, mouth, and sometimes your private areas, depending on the vibe of the room. And if you're thinking, "Oh no, I'm vegan, friend," that's the least of your problem. The milk and honey attracted insects, which would turn you into their home, so they could lay eggs. And when the babies hatched, they'd need food. And luckily for them, they'd have you right there as a readily available snack. The insects and larvae would then burrow into your skin and eat you alive. And chances are you'd stay awake for a lot of it. Even if you did manage to pass out, you'd probably just have nightmares about being eaten by bugs. Unless you're colonizing Mars or delivering space mail, it's extremely unlikely you'd ever end up near a neutron star. In fact, it's statistically impossible. But if you did, all sorts of gruesome things would happen too soon after one pulls you in. You'd find yourself in a constant state of free fall, with the gravity becoming increasingly intense. This gravity would proceed to rip you apart, starting with whatever part of you was closest to the star at the time. If this somehow didn't end you, the radiation definitely would. Vast amounts of radiation emerge when matter falls into the neutron star, and it's all gonna slam into you hard, like an American gladiator. Even if this doesn't end you, then the levels of magnetism produced by the star will distort your atoms into thin cigar shapes, and the broken bonds between atoms in your molecules will transform you into a plasma cloud, becoming part of the star's radiation. And if you manage to get through all that, you'll become Dr. Manhattan from Watchmen. Congratulations! The Mariana Trench is by far the deepest place in the entire ocean, and diving into it without taking proper safety precautions is a surefire way to perish. Not only does the trench reach down more than 36,000 feet, but it's also home to multitudes of horrifying creatures. including prehistoric sharks, if the teachings of Jason Statham are to be believed. If you did happen to survive long enough to reach the greater depths, the pressure would crush your body, breaking your bones and collapsing your lungs. Your nasal cavity, throat, and chest would all collapse inward, and because you wouldn't have any air left in your body, you wouldn't float to the surface. And if you somehow survived, there's a creature waiting for you down below called Oxidax mutiflorus, which literally means bone-eating snot flower. No, really. It's a creature that feeds on whale bones that have sunk to the bottom of the ocean. Or, in this scenario, your bones. Many children, and probably one or two adults, have spent hours tirelessly trying to dig a hole through the earth, even though we know the feat is physically impossible. But let's say it was somehow possible. What would happen if a person fell down such an immense hole? Would you find dinosaurs? King Kong? A bizarre alien civilization? Unfortunately, the reality would be a far cry from a thrilling Brendan Fraser adventure. First of all, you'd perish before you reach the center of the Earth, which is hotter than the surface of the sun. So as you approach the core, as seen in the film The Core, you'd burn quickly. If the intense heat didn't finish you, then the pressure would. The pressure and air density would begin doubling every 15,000 feet, and the air would become as dense as water on your way to the core. You couldn't just keep falling. The pressure would flatten or suffocate you, because your lungs couldn't expand, and you'd boil alive in virtual liquid oxygen. So to paraphrase TLC, don't go chasing big old holes. In popular fiction, stepping into a particle accelerator is how you get superheroes. But in reality, all you'd get is a heaping helping of radiation that would likely terminate you instantly. Depending on the accelerator's power and radiation, it could off you instantly or slowly. For instance, some accelerators shoot multiple pulses at once. So if you're hit with one, another one will come right behind it faster than you can blink, basically pummeling you with radiation. It would paralyze various parts of your body and give you severe radiation poisoning. So even if you survived the initial hit, you'd eventually perish. Believe it or not, a person has survived being exposed to a particle accelerator. However, the survivor, Anatoly Prokofsky, was hit with a comparatively weak accelerator, 100 times less powerful than the Hadron Collider. So don't go making any dares with your friends. Crucifixion was a popular method of punishment throughout history, and even though it's fallen out of style, it remains a painful way to go. Not only would you get nailed to a cross through your soft tissues, but you'd face the hot sun, unclothed, bleeding, and alone, unless you had a few guys next to you singing a Monty Python song. Once your body lost the strength to hold itself up, you'd end up dangling by your hands or wrists on the cross. In addition to being painful, this would begin to take a toll on your chest, shoulders, and lungs. Eventually, the weight of your body would pull your arms out of their sockets and make it challenging to breathe. It would continue to a slow, painful end as you gradually build up carbon dioxide levels in your body. After a few days, you'd finally perish from suffocation. Neat dehydration isn't always swift. It can take up to 6 days, and during this time, you're going to experience nearly constant suffering. If you become too dehydrated, your body starts to use water from your other parts, such as vital organs. Your brain in particular loses a lot of water, and because your mind controls the rest of you, it starts to impact other organs. If this happens, you'll get headaches and body cramps all over, then slip into a coma. It may sound relatively pleasant compared to some of the other methods in this video, but what's going on inside your body is much more gruesome. Your body stops understanding how to remove waste, so your blood becomes increasingly toxic. By the end, you'll lose the ability to relieve yourself, and the agony would be so extreme that you'd barely be able to have a coherent thought. So, if you're watching this while sipping a coffee or a Diet Coke, it might be time to add a glass of water to the rotation. Enduring any sort of decompression is a frightening way to go. When you're a diver going down deep, surfacing too fast, colloquially called the bends, could prove fatal. But you get a pretty good Radiohead record out of it. When you transition from being under extreme physical pressure to enduring much less pressure at the surface, this causes gases from your various body cavities to enter your bloodstream. From there, these bubbles can go anywhere inside. They can infiltrate your vital organs, your joints, and even your brain. If it's fatal, you will experience severe muscle cramps and pain all through your body until you go. Of course, there is also the opposite, explosive decompression, which, as you can guess from the name, is generally far more grisly. Take the example of what happened on the Byford Dolphin Oil rig in 1983. In this case, divers were inside a decompression chamber when a human error led to the chamber suddenly decompressing. Within a fraction of a second, 3 of the divers boiled from the inside, while a 4th was sucked violently through a narrow opening that essentially turned him inside out. There are all sorts of ways to get burned alive. Someone could boil you, burn you at the stake, or throw you into a giant pot, or you could get roasted by Godzilla's laser breath. And those are just a few examples. But no matter how you swing it, being burned alive is excruciating. Your skin will peel, your muscles will burn, and your organs may begin to boil or decompose inside you. You could bleed out or perish from shock and pain, or you could suffocate as the heat robs all the oxygen from the room around you. Depending on the air's temperature around the fire, your eyes might boil in your skull, or become burned until you become blind. You could also spend your final minutes with your throat swollen and your eyesight ruined, all while feeling like you can't breathe. The blowtorch gagging home alone suddenly seems a lot less funny. So what do you think? Which of these would be the worst way to go? Let us know in the comments below. And while you're at it, check out some of these other videos from our weird history.